the 180-day disclosure countdown. Word of warning. If you were turned off with discussion and speculation on the subject of UAPs based on recent official government press releases, then this video is going to miss its mark. However, if you are not afraid to look at these authentic news stories and ask yourself, what are they actually telling us here? Then I believe you'll stay to the end. Within 6 months, as of December 27th, 2020, the Director of National Intelligence was asked to consult spy chiefs and officials in the Defense Department and submit a report to Congress on all information they have on UAPs. This request comes as part of the recent COVID-19 relief bill. I don't understand how it got wrapped up in this particular bill, but that's normal for these times, I guess. The level of chatter about this topic now is so loud, it can't be ignored by me. I thought I was doing a series on paranormal hoaxes and Art Bell's involvement in them, but with the gradual release of information we have been getting on the topic of UAPs, it's so noticeably ramped up as of 2017, and even more so throughout 2020. It's truly too bad whole Art Bell isn't around anymore to speculate and comment on this current news. Personally, I've been into the topic for as long as I can remember, but my interest level and or availability, free time to pursue it over the years varies. During the lockdowns and the virtual nature of things now, I'm finding time to dig deeper into these areas again. It's a good thing too, because things are getting intense. My wife, on the other hand, is not interested in the subject at all, so I really don't bring it up a ton anymore, unless I'm really freaked out about something that I've learned, and even then, I usually don't. But this 180-day countdown is very troubling, especially after this year we've had. And it inspired me to create a mostly coherent account of the recent level of governmental admission on the subject of UAPs. I have compiled my thoughts here in the medium that I'm currently working with, and the result is this video. There have just been too many legitimate official reports in the mainstream for me to ignore what's happening here, and I wanted to compile a short history on the U.S. government's involvement with the subject of UAPs and UFOs since 2017, and highlight all of the recent official news releases on the subject with references. One would think the accumulation of these official stories would result in some public interest. I've not seen much evidence of this, and perhaps that's by design. This would be the perfect time to disclose from the standpoint of the release of such information may lead to civil unrest. There already has been plenty of civil unrest now, so it would just be one more additional stressor to tack on. The powers that be want to stay ahead of it, and when it comes to the public perception of them, they want you to believe that too, of course. Currently, they are releasing this information while public attention is understandably elsewhere. COVID-19, the presidential election, lockdown, prominent social protests, toxic conspiracy theories, poverty, racism, natural disasters, riots, and that was just yesterday. I'd like to highlight a few of the major stories regarding UAPs and the government's admission during the year 2020. 1 month after the mid-March COVID lockdown, I began to notice a growing number of stories on UAPs. On April 29th, 2020, CNN reported the Pentagon had officially released UFO videos. They said they don't know what these things are. This next story is one that I found in Scientific American titled Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, better known as UFOs, deserve scientific investigation. Interdisciplinary teams of scientists should study them. And in July of this year, the New York Times reported No longer in the shadows, Pentagon's UFO unit will make some findings public. August 14th, 2020, the U.S. Department of Defense had an immediate press release titled Establishment of Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. There you go. On December 8th, Popular Mechanics released a story titled Leaked Government Photo Shows Motionless Cube-Shaped UFO. The U.S. intelligence community has known about the mysterious object for 2 years. What could it be? And then, of course, the story that started it all for me. This is the one where I just pushed it over the top. COVID bill includes 180-day countdown for Pentagon to make UFO disclosures. We are also at a point when technology is literally advancing exponentially right before our eyes. Perhaps we are just destined to discover some truths on this subject as we continue to progress and innovate. Maybe we are just at that point where our technology is attracting the attention of something, or we've somehow awoken it. It's going to be tricky for the U.S. government to finally release info on the subject due to the fact they have been studying the phenomena since the early 1950s and still don't seem to understand what we're dealing with, unless that's all been a charade too. You might be thinking, how do we trust the government to tell us the truth now when they've been keeping us in the dark for so long? Perhaps those in charge had a rationale as to why to keep the subject secret in the first place. Did they heed the advice of the Brookings Report and choose to keep us sheltered for a few more generations? The Brookings Report, or Proposed Studies on the Implications of Peaceful Space Activities for Human Affairs, often referred to as the Brookings Report, was a 1960 report commissioned by NASA and created by the Brookings Institution in collaboration with NASA's Committee on Long-Range Studies. It was a study that looked at all implications of America's expansion into space, from everything from commerce to the impact of international affairs. Among other topics, it discussed concerns about how the public would handle news of the discovery of a superintelligence. The position of that report was that news of that sort could send society into chaos, even though the phenomena has probably been here much, much longer than us anyhow. They simply think we can't handle the truth. Apparently, they are the only ones capable of rationally dealing with this phenomena. Perhaps this news story contradicts that sentiment. Texans ain't ready for extraterrestrial reveal, scientist says. He has obviously never been here. Back in 2017, when the news broke about the existence of the U.S. government-funded program to study UAPs, or AATiP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, as it was called, and the seemingly simultaneous founding of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, only a few months earlier, with overlapping personnel, it all seemed a little odd to me. I thought it was most likely a publicity stunt of some sort, and I pretty much dismissed the whole thing. In hindsight, those two moments, the admission of AATiP and the founding of TTSA, were really the true beginnings of disclosure. Both organizations possessed off-world materials in an effort to find applications for them, and they've also created technology solely made to track UAPs, and they are poised to discuss their findings further. Everything that is happening right now has already happened more or less before. 74 years ago, the U.S. government conducted seemingly transparent studies of unexplained aerial phenomena. I'm sure most are familiar with Project Blue Book, but if not, here is a brief overview. In 1947, citizens in the United States began reporting seeing flying saucers and other strange craft in the skies. The government commissioned the Air Force to swiftly conduct studies of these phenomena, with projects named Sign in 1947 and Grudge in 1949. The third and largest study in 1952 was titled Project Blue Book. The goal of these projects were to determine if UFOs were in fact a threat to national security and to collect and analyze data related to UFOs. Blue Book went on for 18 years, finally ceasing activity in 1970. After all that time and the collection of thousands of reports, the government's official conclusion was UFOs do not pose a threat to our national security. Current scientific knowledge can explain any described so-called UFO technology, and they found no evidence that UFOs were extraterrestrial. They tried their best to explain each and every case. However, there are a small percentage of reports that remained unexplained, but they did not want to discuss those. Now, it's really just a matter of how much are they actually willing to disclose and how much of it will be manipulation of the public in some way. I still don't know what any of this means yet, but I will discuss what we do know about AATiP and why were these significant turning points in the dissemination of information on the topic of UAPs. I hate all these stupid acronyms. BTW. In 2007, the program was initiated by then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid at the behest of billionaire and government contractor Robert Bigelow. Bigelow had his hand in a number of paranormal investigations over the years. Skinwalker Ranch, of course, comes to mind, but that's a totally different story. The project was funded $22 million over a 5-year period, and due to the fact that Bigelow was awarded this contract, he ultimately has control of the information discovered and has chosen to keep all discoveries private. But there is a document that exists from that study. It's a 494-page report that deals with worldwide UFO sightings over several decades. It is pointed out that this report is but a sample of regular monthly Pentagon briefings on UAPs. AATiP also funded and published 38 studies on topics ranging from detection and high-resolution tracking of vehicles at hypersonic velocities to warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions. My guess is that many of these studies have continued within TTSA and by the new UAP task force, formerly AATiP. The program director from AATiP, Luis Elizondo, is also one of the key people involved in the creation of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. The other founding members include Hal Puthoff and Tom DeLonge. Puthoff makes sense considering his long tenure at SRI, Stanford Research Institute. At SRI throughout the 70s and 80s, Puthoff was director of a CIA DIA-funded program tasked with the investigation of human paranormal abilities. Plus, he's closely associated with the subject of remote viewing. This man may know more classified information than anyone else on Earth. And last, Tom DeLonge. Truthfully, when I heard the news of TTSA's formation, I was instantly turned off by DeLonge as spokesperson for this venture. I just assumed it was the usual UFO baloney served up to us. The whole thing just left a bad taste in my mouth, like a rancid bologna sandwich. So I just stopped paying attention. If they had someone cool like Eddie Vedder or somebody, maybe I would have been more interested. But it turns out that DeLonge actually owned a media company. It was called To the Stars, and the newly forming Academy of Arts and Science needed a media division. It does appear that TTSA is really moving ahead with their research, and at least in part willing to share it with the public. Here's a recent example of that. Regarding the UAP observed and recorded by the U.S. Navy, the TTSA is already releasing their observations and analysis of the encounters. Their findings thus far are a sharp contrast to Blue Book's so-called conclusions. They are as follows: sudden and instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocities without signatures, low observability, trans-medium travel, positive lift. Wow, that's quite a list. And there's news stories out there that that really go into detail on what they were actually looking at with those categories. Other nations know of these objects too, but why they keep their stories under wraps is unknown. Not all of these things are kept quiet though. In 2007, France released hundreds of reports on UAPs, and the UK did the same thing in 2012. In current international UAP news, the former Israeli space chief says that the US is in contact with a galactic federation of aliens, and the president knows. And in September, there was a news story about the Japanese military giving instructions on UFOs. It's not the first time the Japanese government has made the statement about potential alien spacecraft appearing on Earth. But apparently there's been a lot of sightings recently, and their military is on high alert. The president has even been asked several times this year about the subject, which is rare. And his comments were as you would expect. In October, Fox News host Maria Bartiromo asked President Trump if UFOs are real. His reply:
"Well, I'm going to have to check on that. I mean, we've heard that. I heard it 2 days ago. I'm going to check on that. I'll take a good strong look at that, Maria. Thanks for bringing it up."
It was a far different stance than the one he took with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos a few months earlier. George asked him what did he think about UFOs? And his response was,
"Do I believe it? Not particularly."
Relatively speaking, the audience actually paying attention to these stories are quite small. Even to me, someone interested in the topic, it's been more of a slow boil in realizing what may actually be happening here. I guess it's just from all the cultural conditioning. And quite possibly at some point, after listening to hoax after hoax on Art Bell, I became resistant to giving these news stories any of my attention. I am paying attention again for some reason. Perhaps I'm back on the hook again and ready for the rug to be pulled out from under me. If 180 days come and go, and we don't have a definitive, formal announcement on the matter, I won't feel too let down, because after the release of all these credible stories in the news this year, I'll just have to consider those as proof of the evidence and confirmation the government is actively studying them. Truth is, the government just might be as baffled as the rest of us. What would Art Bell have thought about the current state of affairs concerning government admission of UAPs? We'll never know. You can always tune into Gorgeous George. Maybe it's angels. I'd like to leave you with some final thoughts and a few questions that still linger in my mind. This is kind of a lame joke / question, but I just have to ask. When did UFOs become UAPs? Seriously, I'd like to know when the switch happened. For me, it's been fairly recently since I adopted the acronym, but I don't know when it entered the media and culture and replaced the term UFO. Maybe it hasn't replaced it. Maybe it's just in addition to. Okay, so I've been trying to screen record this Washington Post story about the Navy wanting UFOs to be changed to UAPs, and every single time I do it, it literally freezes. My computer shuts down. I'm going to do it for the sake of the channel. Here we go. Okay, for those of you that don't know, Command Shift. Whoops. Can't do this while I'm filming. Command Shift 5 brings this screen record up, and then you position it where you want it. As luck would have it with these kind of things, it happened 2 times in a row, and as soon as I tried to film it, because it's never happened before. One of those things, I guess. Alright, here, let's see if we can actually save it. See if anything happens when I try to save it. Alright, when I pulled it up, this is what I got. It did not film it. So,
Look at that. Couldn't be saved, but at least it didn't shut my computer down this time.
I've just got to address this one too. Harry Reid's exercise band Boondoggle. Are the injuries somehow related to his involvement in releasing information on the government-funded program studying UAPs? It always seemed a little curious, like someone wanted to send a message to a government whistleblower on the subject. He actually sued the company who manufactured the bands, so I guess that kind of damages my theory a little bit. I'm just imagining a scenario where this short mobster comes into Reed's office to shake him up, and instead of cutting the brakes on his car, the mobster makes a nick in his exercise band.
Hey, Reed, you like working out with those exercise bands, don't you, Harry boy? If you ain't careful, one day you're gonna be tugging with all your might. And one of those bad boys is all of a sudden gonna go snap. There goes one of them cloudy little puppy dog eyes of yours. I'd be testing each of those bands every time before I worked out if I was you. You better watch your back, Senator. And you better watch your eye. Capiche?
Apparently, the Vatican has been preparing Catholics for this announcement for years, and Hollywood has prepared the public for 75 years. In many ways, maybe art did prepare a large portion of the population for this kind of a revelation too. Could this be the way they drag us all into the dystopian future described in George Orwell's book 1984? It may already be too late. Or is it a chance for humanity to grow and unite in a productive way? Let's say these UAPs are natural to Earth, and they are being subject to study by our scientists. Yet, so far, publicly at least, we have been unable to come to any conclusions on what they are or what their intentions are. By opening the topic up to everyone, this will allow for legitimate scientific research in the public sphere, all above board, with an emphasis on collaborating with other nations. Then and only then will the stigma about the subject be removed. Universities and companies will be able to participate openly and without ridicule, or at least that's what I see as a positive path forward, with a fresh perspective for our world and the strange universe that surrounds us. What about that Jetpack guy in LA? Maybe he's an angel too.